Hello and welcome. It is Sunday night on the 25th, and this is just going to be a rundown of my interview at Chillicothe State Penitentiary with Kevin Gaffin. But I want to talk about a few other things leading up to that all relate to the Kevin Gaffin trial, conviction, so on and so forth. And there's there's still as many questions in my mind as there are answers on some of these things, and I'll give you some of my opinions as we go through this. But also feel free to ask questions in the comments. I'll probably talk a lot at first, and then I'll go back and see if there's questions in the comments. If you have statements, he was set up, he was innocent, he was guilty, that's fine. Those aren't, I'm more, I'm kind of into the questions about it or things I've learned. I've learned a lot of stuff along the way. I'm going to talk about the what we talked about in the prison. I'm not going to talk about everything because there's some things that I want to follow up on. I consider this sort of a investigation, and I would like to talk to certain other people. And there's some things that Kevin told me that I want to follow up on that I may or may not talk about here much. So just before I jump into the actual uh, time at Chillicothe State Penitentiary, so I have put out the whole trial online, so it's 4 days basically, or 3 days. Is it 3 days? And there is it's I think it's 3 days actually, and then there's the sentencing, but there's also an appeal hearing. And I've watched all that, and I took copious notes. I probably took 20 pages worth of notes watching all that. And I'm going to come back. I'll share some of my insights on that. But I thought when I watched it, I watched it a while before interviewing Mr. Gaffin, and I thought when I watched it that I would be, I thought like it would be boring at times, but it's not. So I would encourage people to watch it. I think I watched it on 1.5 speed on YouTube. All those are on YouTube, so you can get a flavor of it. So I watched before all this. I watched the trial. I've repeatedly tried to engage and reach out to Ryan Applegate, and I know now that I have his contact information, and he did text with me some. And I would love to talk to him. I've offered to talk to him even off the record, where I'm not going to record him or anything, but I would love to interview him. And I know, based on the allegations that he's put forward, that were allegations that a jury convicted Kevin Gaffin of giving him three, I think, life sentences. I realize, the perception that Ryan Applegate could have of, I don't want to relive this, I don't want to deal with this, and I get that, but I think that there's so many unanswered questions. I would hope that he too would like to bring more closure to this, because I think the community is very divided on what happened and what didn't happen, and the trial itself. If people know that I put out that I tried to talk to Brianna Wisecup and stopped. I don't know how to get in touch with these people. I don't know their phone numbers or anything like this. And I was spurned by her. There are a set of people. If any of these people would talk to me, I would love to talk to you. I know Ryan Applegate's like, you already made up your mind, and I think I've made up my mind about some things, but not others. And I'll talk about what I've made up my mind about, what I haven't. But I would like to talk to David Shivener, Brianna Wisecup. I would like to talk to Joni Hughes, Angie Day. I would like to talk to Tyler Cantrell about this, because Tyler Cantrell was Kevin Gaffin's attorney. And I have to say, based on what I watched during the trial, I think Tyler Cantrell would have done a far better job on this case than Aaron Haslam did. Aaron Haslam did a terrible job on the case. But I would like to talk to any of those people. If you were on the jury, if there's somebody out there that sees this that was on the jury, I'd like to talk to you. I see this as ultimately an investigation that could end up being a documentary of some sort. And I think that the thing about it is, unless something dramatically changes, there's going to be, people can disagree on that's that's why this is such an intriguing thing, because it's so unclear in places. It's so it's so unclear in places, and I respect that people can come to different conclusions. Now, I did say that I would make one comment. One thing that hasn't changed at all in my mind is that Kevin Gaffin, to me, did not receive a fair trial. He did not have competent counsel. If you sit there and watch the trial, I was taking notes throughout, and I started taking notes of what I would ask. The prosecution goes first, and then the defense. And I started jotting down questions I would have asked, questions that I would have asked. And Aaron Haslam hardly didn't ask any questions. And it's a disservice not just to Kevin Gaffin, but it was ultimately a disservice to Ryan Applegate, because by the total incompetence of Aaron Haslam in defending Kevin Gaffin, it leaves these open questions because he did not, it was just so bizarre that how bad the Aaron Haslam was during this trial. So during the trial, not to go too far, I'm not going to go too deep into the trial itself, but because I want to talk about the interview in prison. But the prosecution presented its case. There was basically no physical evidence whatsoever, and there was only one person, Joni Hughes, that testified to something that she had actually seen with her own eyes. She claimed to have seen blood in the toilet or on the toilet paper on relating to Ryan in May of 2008. There were two allegations that came out in the trial. One was that Kevin had sodomized Ryan Applegate in May of 2008 in the barn. That is still there. You can still see the barn through the woods. I believe you can. I didn't go onto the property other than when I knocked on the door to try to get Brown and Weisskopf to talk to me. And then there was supposedly a second incident, which was in December of 2008, in which he sodomized Ryan Applegate in the living room. And so that's the kind of the prosecution's thing. There was no evidence or anybody that even seen anything relating to the second time. The first time, the evidence was this supposed the blood on the toilet paper, blood in the toilet. So that was, just so anybody that doesn't know this, that was in 2008. It was reported to Child Protective Services by someone. Obviously, the cousin, Joni Hughes, and Angie Day, the aunt, were involved in that reporting. It was investigated by CPS, a guy named Bruce England, who testified during the trial, and found to be lacking merit or evidence. And the 2008 May was closed at that time. Then there was the December, and then it wasn't until 2015 where Ryan Applegate was making comments about being suicidal in school that caused it to kind of come forward. So you get this whole thing. He was under 10 at the time. If you're from Adams County, you probably know the stuff I'm telling you, but maybe not a lot. Maybe some people don't. But the reason why Kevin Gaffin got, these life sentences with no parole was because it was a victim under 10 when they took place. So that's kind of when you go through the trial. I'm going to say something here about getting a fair trial. Is that I go back, it's the whole thing that people would come down to is, how could Ryan have this story and stick to the story, and the story not really seem to vary for so long, and supposedly had been through all of these counseling sessions and so forth. But there is inconsistencies in the story, and as far as I can tell. So there's inconsistencies on the timeline on some things. And I personally feel, and I'm not a lawyer, that had Aaron Haslam drilled on that stuff, that Kevin Gaffin would not have got convicted. That is my gut feeling, because there were some consistencies and anomalies, it seemed to be, in the storyline. And that's why I would like to talk to somebody like Ryan Gaffin or even David Shivner or Brianna Weisskopf about this. I want to hear that side. I want to hear from somebody on the jury. What got brought up, it did get brought up in the trial that there was an inconsistency about the car that Ryan had said, his mom had driven off in a car that they didn't have at the time. There's some inconsistency about TVs, that the TVs that weren't there at the time. There was a thing about the block that was supposedly used to, one of the blocks or both of the blocks used to hold down his arms in the first incident in the barn. Was supposedly had green paint on it, and that didn't exist until after that green paint block wasn't theoretically at the barn until 2012. And so there's like these inconsistencies like that. There's things like that. They could be explainable. They could be explainable. They could be that this just happens. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a medical professional. But Aaron Haslam never really picked apart any of these inconsistencies. He barely touched the surface. In the trial, when it gets after the so I guess in a criminal trial, the prosecution makes an opening statement and the defense can make an opening statement, or they can defer to make their opening statement until after the trial is the prosecution has finished their case. So Haslam, this is how bad he was. He deferred doing his opening statement. Then, as far as I can recall, remember and listening, he really didn't have an opening statement when he began his case. And his closing was terrible. His during the prosecution case, his cross-examination was incompetent, as far as I'm concerned. Then, when it got to his trial, his part of the trial, he said at one point that he was going to call 10 witnesses. 10. He only called 3 witnesses and he rested his case. And then he had a half-ass closing. It was just very bizarre because I was primed 10 witnesses. The judge had said that the case was going to be over by a certain time, that like over that day. And then I'm like, how does this compute? Because he said 10 witnesses. And at first I thought the judge is like trying to press it along, but I don't know that he was. And somebody told me that sometimes in the back room, the lawyers are telling the judge how much time they're going to need on things. So the judge might have just been echoing that, but there was really no case. And I don't know what Aaron Haslam was thinking. Did he think that the question of the car and the blocks and the green paint on the blocks, that was enough reasonable doubt to not get that Kevin wouldn't be convicted? Well, if that was the case, it was a damn incompetent, dangerous move, and it didn't work. I think that I don't know in these kind of cases, but I think one of the things is that you want to have, if you're on the defense, you want to have a theory of the case that is that it either didn't happen or how it happened or what actually happened. And he never had any of that. He never had any of that. So he kind of didn't rebut any of the testimony that had happened from Aaron or from Ryan or otherwise directly, or challenge him on the testimony. So it was just very odd. I mean, listening to the whole trial and feeling like the thing that kind of scared me though was that I still thought if I was on the jury, I probably would have voted not to convict him because I just didn't feel that there was enough. To me, I even felt that the things like the car and stuff were enough reasonable doubt that it would have been hard to convict him on the stuff. But I wasn't on the jury, so I wasn't there. And there's times during the trial when they're putting up exhibits and so forth, and you can't really see those when you're watching the video of the trial. So there's some missing missing things there that a juror would see that you wouldn't see, and I wasn't sitting there. Okay. So let's get to going to the prison. And what I'm going to do is I'm watching out of my eyes. I can see comments. I'm going to come back and try to address comments once I get through kind of outlining things, and then I'll come back and I guarantee I'll look at the comments and put some of them up on screen and try to address them as best I can. I prefer, questions rather than comments. Questions. So I interviewed Kevin in the prison on January 21st, a Wednesday. I found it to be bizarre dealing with the prison. I was approved like 3 times. I was approved back from like a little after Thanksgiving or before Thanksgiving. And it was just always like, there was one guy, Eklis was his name, very nice to deal with by email. And then he was only temporarily doing something, and then he was doing his regular job, I guess. And then the people were kind of hard to deal with, but we all got squared away. So I showed up. My interview was supposed to be at 2 p.m. I showed up at Chillicothe at about a quarter after. I got to there's kind of an area you go in the visitor area and where I go, and I went up and told them I was with the press, that I was on their list. They confirmed that there was one chair on the far side of where the metal detectors were. There's only one. was and stuff like that. And so I sat down there, and I was waiting there, and then I got told I had a printout of my questions, even though I'd been told I couldn't bring any paper in. I just was figuring I'd throw them in the trash because they were going to give me a copy of my. They printed them out and gave me a copy, which they did. So I'm sitting there waiting, and I'm kind of looking at my questions, and I still had my phone with me. I figured they'd have a place to like hold my phone and stuff. But then some very obnoxious woman came in and told me I had to take those to my. I couldn't bring anything in. I had to take everything in my car. Couldn't. And so I went out to my. I asked, could I keep my coat? Yeah, I keep my coat. I'm like, well, what about my car keys? Literally, they're like, you cannot have anything. You can have. And I'm like, what about my car keys? Well, you can keep your car keys. So I go out to my car. I put all the shit I had, which wasn't much. It was my phone, these notes, and I think it was about it. Like, and then I come back in. I sit down in the chair again. Then she comes over like 2 minutes later and tells me I have to go to my car and wait in my car till 1:45, which would have been good to tell me that when you told me to go to my car like literally 5 minutes ago. And if you know that 21st, it was not snowy or anything like you have now. The snowmageddon's going on now, but it was cold and windy and kind of drizzly. And so anyway, I finally get in the prison. When I was in that reception area, I took a picture, and some of you might have seen me make a post saying that I'm going to get processed to go into the prison. I go in, I take the guy escorts me in, and I'm gonna come back and I'll describe escorting in. And I get to the room where I'm gonna interview Kevin Gaffin. There was a guard and there was a woman there. They gave me my questions. These are the ones they gave me that they had printed out. I sent them a PDF and they printed it out for me. And then I did my interview. About 15 minutes into the interview, the woman left the room. I didn't notice she left the room. She was behind me. And then she comes back in. It's like, you have to come in the hallway right now. And I went into the hallway, and it's like, this is the warden. In the picture that I posted, they were all hacked because I had posted this picture of this reception area. You can't have any picture posted. Da, da, da. So then they made me go, and the guard took me, and all worked out, but they go through security back out to my car to get my phone to take that picture down. So if you notice, that picture went down. Then back in, da, da, da. When I was out, the lady that was super obnoxious to me, she was super obnoxious again. You posted a picture, can't do that. Goodbye. And the guy was with the guard that was escorting me, who was very nice. He's like, he's coming right back in. So so I go out and come back in, and then I looked everywhere in that area, and there is no sign that says you can't take pictures in that area. It's kind of like the reception area coming into the jail. And so I'm going to contact them and even the guard who was very nice that came out. He was leaving when we left when we came out. It was the end of the day for him, so he was going to his car. And I'm like, let's look and see if we can find anything here that says you can't take a picture in this area. And I couldn't find it. So anyway, now to the I'm going to say something about going in because I've never been in a prison before, and hopefully you haven't either. I haven't visited anybody in prison. But when you go in at Chillicothe, the main prison is kind of to your right from where you go in, and it's like a long, old building. I think the guy told me it was 100 years old. When you come in through this security area where they scan you, they stamp your hand, and you have to show your ID and your hand stamp at every place. Like 3 places I had to show it just going in from after I went through security. But when you go out the door, there's kind of like from this little building where they process you, you walk across like a courtyard to like the administration building, and I guess where they do visitation. And there was like a playground and stuff there. And I'm like, is that like so the prisoners can, like, if their kids come to visit, they can play with them out there and stuff like that? And the answer is yep, that's what that's for. And so you just don't think about these things that when I never thought about this stuff. Like if an inmate's kids come, they can play with them out in this little playground area that's there. So that's good. I mean, that's nice. By the way, as a side note, the prisoners all have tablets. So I can regularly text and message with Kevin Gaffin through the tablet. They can make phone calls. They do jobs. They have jobs. I asked the guard this too. He told me that jobs start at 6 a.m. They get off at 4, and then they can do stuff like go play basketball in the yard and stuff. And then they have dinner time. So that's like the day in the life of Chillicothe. But Chillicothe is like the minimum security prison relative to the other ones. And the people that are there are prisoners that have not been troublemakers in any way, pretty much. So I think that, it's kind of like the prisoners have a better deal at Chillicothe than other places. All right. So I get to the room where I'm going to leave out the middle where I had to leave and come back. And Kevin Gaffin was in the room already, sitting there. He looked in good health and good, and so I kind of led off by saying to him, the reality, Kevin, is I think you're going to die in prison, and I think he is. The reality is I think he's going to die in prison, and it's a shame because I don't think he got a fair trial. Okay, I'm not saying whether he's guilty or not. What I'm saying is I don't think he got a fair trial, and I've combed the trial, took copious notes, and and I certainly don't want anybody guilty to go free. I just don't think he got a fair trial. I'm not making a comment whether he's guilty or not of the allegations. I'm just saying the trial itself was not fair. So I said to him, if you're probably going to die in here, and if there's stuff you need to get off your soul, you got to get it off your soul, because get off your chest. And his response was just, I don't have anything to get off of my chest. I'm not guilty. And it was very quick. And I don't really know how to process it all because his answers were very quick and very tight, and they're not emotional. And the thing is, he's been over 9 years now in prison, and you're probably not going to cry. You're probably not going to be emotional. I have no idea. I can't imagine. I can't imagine being in prison guilty. I can't imagine being in prison if you were innocent. And so that's kind of how it led off. And then we walked through kind of the trial, and we walked through all of the events that happened. And there's a few of them that I can highlight. You can see on here I have my notes that I took, and I took, on the back, he drew out a map of the house and so forth for me. So I've got a lot of notes that I took with him, and I haven't really processed them. And I'm still processing just some of the things he said, and I got to follow up on it. And it's not a simple thing. It needs work. I mean, I need to go spend time. If I just got to go spend time to get more closure on this thing. One of the things in the trial, and I don't know why I'm just looking down and bringing this up, but one of the things was that Kevin got demonized tremendously in the trial. And even if the things that he was demonized over were true, it doesn't mean he was a pedophile. And so I thought it was kind of like, I don't know if Aaron could be objecting to all this stuff, but it's kind of like, it was just kind of painting him as a bad guy, like an abusive guy. And there was one thing that he constantly called Ryan queer and fag and mama's boy and stuff like that. These terms like that were in it, and that they constantly was calling this like 6, 7-year-old kid a queer and a fag. And it's hard for me to process that. I can't imagine doing that to a 6 or 7-year-old kid. He denied it during the trial. And I don't know why I looked down and saw that first. He denied it during the trial. And he denied it when I interviewed him, that he doesn't deny calling him a mama's boy. He said he called him a mama's boy, but he wasn't calling him a queer and a fag and all this kind of stuff. And so the thing about it was that in the trial, the prosecutors tried to grill him. Like, they very aggressively grilled him on, like, calling the kid a queer and a fag. Okay, so if he did that, it's wrong. Doesn't mean he's a pedophile. But let's come back a second here. So he says in the trial that he didn't do that, and then they go back to some post that he made where he said, I guess he said that it was something about Tim McGraw, I think. And it was like, I don't like Tim McGraw music, but I'm not a queer. And that was like his reply. And I'm going to be honest with everybody watching, that might be something I might say about Tim McGraw. I'm not a Tim McGraw fan, and I don't know a lot of guys that are big Tim McGraw fans. He's more of a chick thing, I think. And so the prosecution went back and dug up this comment he made on a Facebook post where he made that he wasn't a fan of Tim McGraw, and used that. And so my thing is, and that's what I want, maybe you guys can help me. I want to know, did anybody else that dealt with, I've asked a couple people that say they were friends of Kevin, but did anybody else see Kevin ever call Ryan Applegate a queer and a fag? Maybe he did it. I don't know. But it seemed like if it happened a lot, you would have more evidence than having to go back and claiming some Tim McGraw comment by Kevin Gaffin on Facebook meant he did this. So there's a lot of things like that. In the trial, it was claimed that Kevin repeatedly took Ryan to the children's home and told him he was going to leave him there. Okay, I don't know whether that happened or not. Kevin pointed out that, and I've driven since I drove to Brianna's place. It's like 20 minutes from easy 20 minutes from West Union. So to take Brian to the all the time to the children's home to tell him keep your mouth shut or else could happen. Okay, but it would be a long drive. It was, you'd be doing it when you were doing a Walmart run or something. That you'd be doing this. So there's just some like little things like this that I'm trouble process. Now on the other hand, Ryan and his comments to me in texting, I'm not looking at him, I don't have him up in front of me, but he described, in texting to me, Kevin, I believe, is a monster. Okay, so it's not like Ryan is changing his story or recanting his story, at least in the text to me. But I'd love to talk to him. I'd love to talk to Brianna. I'd love to talk to David. I'd love to talk to Joni. I'd love to talk to Angie Day. I'd love to talk to Tyler Cantrell. It will serve the interest of everybody to kind of vet this out more. I don't know if it'll bring an answer, but it might get clearer to an answer or help people and just bring some more closure. The thing about a bad trial or an adequate trial is it doesn't bring closure. Okay. So we talked for about an hour. They gave me some more time because of this whole thing having to go out to my car or not. They were nice to me at the jail. The woman who was there, I can't remember her name, and the guard, both were very nice. I got to meet the head guy, the warden, because of this post, and other than bitching at me about the post and making me go out and take it down, he was nice. And so we talked about. I took Kevin through the trial, and he, told me about basically the stuff that Kevin has maintained in the trial. He maintained, he added, he amplified. He told me some things about some people I should talk to. So for example, he told me some things that these are from his mouth. I haven't heard these. I'd like to talk to the grandfather, his Wayne Wisecup. Okay. If he's still, I assume he's still living. Hopefully he's still living. But about this. So, there's things that just Kevin shed light on from the trial, and about Ryan always hating school, and this is a name that floored me when he said this, that to help that Ryan tended to do better in school and be more present in school when Kevin Gaffin was in his life, but that he hired at one point in 2012 Jason Francis to be a tutor for Ryan. Now think about that for a second. So Jason Francis was a tutor. You guys, some of you might know what that is. I asked Mr. Gaffin if he knew who Steve Carraway was, but it kind of floored me that Jason Francis' name came up because he must have been pretty young at the time, but that he was a tutor for Kevin Gaffin. He talked about, like, there's a thing about Ryan putting his mouth over an Ale-8 bottle in the trial as if in a sexual way, in a fellatio type of way that his grandfather supposedly saw. And Kevin told me that when that happened, he knew nothing about this connecting to any event involving him, and that Brianna had asked Kevin to basically man up Ryan some. And Kevin told me that that's when he got like a basketball hoop for him. He would take him hunting and stuff. And I asked him, did he take to it? And his answer was yes. He seemed to really enjoy going hunting and hanging out with the guys, but that Ryan was never an aggressive guy. He was not an aggressive person. He described it like when you play basketball, you could pass the ball, he'd shoot and stuff like this, but he wasn't going to be, fighting you for the ball. He was more so that it was actually Brianna was the one asking him to basically take him hunting, toughen him up, man him up some. He told me a lot about the event on Thanksgiving of 2012 and Jimmy Vaughn visiting at the time and what transpired then. So he told me that certain affidavits, I have a whole stack of affidavits now that I have that were done in this case that I've reviewed most of them, that generally support Kevin Gaffin's version of events. And, and there were things about Ryan that never were. So there were in the trial, it was in there that, Kevin said a bad thing about Tim McGraw, but it wasn't in there that Ryan had issues at school with having been accused of theft and so forth and having some school issues, accused of lying at times. So there's, I just, I know I'm not maybe giving closure to all this, but those are, some of the highlights. He said in the stand, Kevin said in the stand in the trial that the 4 or 5 years with Brianna were wonderful. And he said that again, like my life with her for 4 or 5 years was wonderful. And then in Kevin's view, what went wrong is that Brianna became kind of an alcoholic. There was some testimony about that by an officer, by a former Manchester officer in the trial, and that on Thanksgiving, kind of the straw that broke the camel's back is that she, according to Kevin, she came home and passed out drunk in the bedroom while he had company, this Jimmy Vaughn over. And so that's kind of what Kevin claims was kind of the precipitated, this is going to end, this is going to go to nowhere. This is going to end. He also claimed in the trial there was a statement that Kevin had received stolen property. I asked him about that. He claims that Floor Daniel was selling stuff off and you bid on, like, I guess, pallets of equipment or something. And he knew somebody there and he had paid for it, but the person didn't turn the money in. And that's how he got pinned on that. I don't know. It sounds like you want a receipt if you did that, or you want the other person arrested. So I didn't really close that issue for me. Okay. And I just want to see if there's anything. I think a part of Kevin's whole story is that there was a lot of animosity between Brianna's family and him, and they kind of didn't like him and put him in a bad light. And I kept saying, like, well, how would this ever come together? I mean, the only explanation that would support his side of events would be that this 2008 thing did not happen. That's what the investigation in 2008 said. And kind of like that somewhere after that time, somebody thought, oh, we can latch back into this and somewhat like, manipulate Ryan to have this story, and the story isn't true and blah, blah, blah. Now, that seems very hard to believe, right? So that seems hard to believe you could get all those steps. But I do believe there's a lot of animosity. There were a lot of issues. There were a lot of axes to grind. Kevin had not paid Brianna alimony that it was due her per court, but that was disputed. I don't know where that landed. David had been in a fight with Kevin and at the Bottoms Up Bar in Manchester, and so there were a lot of bad blood between them. So that's kind of the rundown. I wanted to do this just to talk about this. Oh, there was, for example, there's a lot of things I brought up where Kevin had a comeback to. Like there was in the trial, it was brought up that somehow supposedly Kevin had put gay porn on Ryan's iPod. Well, and I don't know, like I had iPods, and for most of the time iPods, I'd have to go back to the years in question here. They wouldn't have had really a video thing. There was later an iPod Touch that had a video thing, but then Kevin's like, we didn't even have internet where we were. And so it's, that was just like, you didn't have internet. And then, one thing that kind of struck me about even going there, and Kevin brought this up too, is, you have all this happen and supposedly Ryan has PTSD, but you never tear down the barn. So I believe you can still see the remains of the barn that was already dilapidated through the woods. It's like a long, narrow lot, and so you can see when I was filming up the road from the house, that's when I think I could see the barn through the trees there. And he told me, yeah, that is where the barn is. And it's like, if this all happened, why wouldn't you have moved? Why wouldn't you have changed the living room furniture? Why wouldn't you have torn the barn down? These kind of things. So that doesn't say what did or didn't happen. I just those were some of the things that Kevin talked about. Like I said, our interview was about an hour, and they probably gave me a couple minutes more than an hour. Again, I was not allowed to record. I was not allowed to have video or anything. I wasn't even allowed to bring paper in, but they printed out notes I had sent them so I could take notes on there. And they did give me a pad if I wanted to take additional notes with Kevin. Now I think I can, I can probably talk to him on the phone. There's other ways you can talk to the prisoners, and he claimed that somebody else did Zoom calls in there. So, once I got to the point of actually meeting him face to face, I wanted to do so. One of the things I'll say when we were leaving the room, and then I'm going to look at the comments. The room that we were in was cold. It was like a meeting room. It had like you could probably have like a classroom type of thing, maybe like two long tables. You could have probably had 10, 12 people sitting in there. But we're kind of two rows of tables, and Kevin and I were sitting up at one, and the guard and this woman were sitting at the other one. And it was cold. It was probably like 60 in there, if I were guessing. And we were commenting when leaving, and Kevin wasn't handcuffed or anything. And we're leaving the room, and we're like, it's cold in here. Like, this room is cold. And the thermostat said, the guard said, oh, the thermostat says it's 78 or something in here. It's like, that's not working. And then they said, like, they were kind of just talking, and he's like, well, Kevin's the guy that fixes all this stuff. And what struck me is it was like a collegial moment. Like, it wasn't like guard and prisoner. It was like, collegial. I won't say friends, but like collegial, like that Kevin is like well respected there for that he fixes things like the air conditionings and heating units and so forth. And it just struck me as like there was no animus. It wasn't like a guard with a perp, it was like a guy with Kevin would know. Kevin's the guy who fixes these kind of things. So anyway, so that's a short skinny. I'm going to go look at the comments here, and I'm going to go back to the beginning, and I'm going to focus on questions. If people have asked a question, I'll put it up on the screen. I got a lot of people, that I'm not making a comment on setups or what have you, and there's a lot of comments here on the, I'm not going to put up comments that are just guilty, not guilty, he was set up, that kind of thing. I want to see if anybody has thing. Now, Mike Rack says the barn was tore down. So I thought I could see, and Kevin seemed to think it was, through the woods, the silhouette of something in the woods. And so if I'm wrong and I'm incorrect, and that's not the barn or the remnants of the barn, then I apologize for making a mistake. But I asked Kevin that. I asked him, is the barn still there? And that, kind of through the woods, I thought I could see it. And he indicated to me. Now, I don't think Kevin would have seen my video, so he might have not understood what I was doing. But it's the barn where I don't, taking the kid to the barn where he supposedly was then sodomized. That was I think a little bit of a walk. So I don't know. But if I got that wrong, I got that wrong, and I apologize that I have it wrong on the barn. So again, if Mike Rack is right, then I'm wrong. But somebody saying, this is what I get. Why wouldn't you get rid of the barn? So and still living in that same house where supposedly this stuff happened. At the time of the trial, for example, in 2015, there's pictures of inside the family room and like the living room where Ryan was, per jury, he did it, right? He sodomized Ryan a second time there. And they still had the same coffee table at the time of the trial, which would have been in 2015. So Ryan was supposedly sodomized by Kevin on May of 2008 and December of 2008, once at the barn, once in the house. And but they still had the same coffee table. I don't know if it was the same couch or not, but the same coffee table. The coffee table had been used, per the testimony, to restrain Ryan's arms. In that, so it seemed like I would think I would get rid of the coffee table. It doesn't say. By the way, the fact that, say, Brianna didn't get rid of a coffee table or didn't do this or didn't tear down the barn, that doesn't mean they're lying, right? That just is, just things that I could say. My observation is that I would have gotten rid of that stuff. I probably would have moved. I would have wanted to move to not be around that, especially if Ryan's going to be there or visiting, to just remove yourself from that environment. Based on what was alleged to have happened there. By the way, one thing I don't get is, could anything happen? Yes. I'm not saying I don't really understand. Thank God. I don't know that I understand any pedophile mind, but I don't understand. It's troubling for me, and I'd like to find somebody that's an expert in this area. So if there's somebody that's an expert, have them come to me that can talk to me about this. That's more of an expert of that you have a pedophile that he only does it twice in 2008 in a 6-month period, and then never happens again. Like, or is not attempted again. That was not asked in the trial, even. And so I don't. It just seems like somebody that's like that would be trying it again. Why would you? Why would, if you were of that ilk, why would you do it twice and then stop and then never try it again? Okay. Um, so all right, I'm gonna get. I'm just looking here for comments. I'm not. Somebody says here, anybody making false lies. I'm not saying that anybody's lying. I don't. I think this is kind of a. That's why I think this will be a great documentary because it's just a odd set of events. It's you like to have, don't you like to have it, anybody watching, would you like to have it that at the end the guilty people are guilty and it's clear. There's no question. It was simple, here's the picture of him shooting the person with the gun, And what this one makes me think up is that it's not clear. And frankly, if I go back in time to about before 2018, I just took for granted that bad shit happens in the criminal justice system, but that by and large it's good. But there can be some bad stuff. The more I have been involved, the more I think that a lot of bad stuff happens. Okay, I think people get targeted. I think that prosecutors get convictions of people that are innocent. I think that a lot of bad stuff happens, and the more I've come into contact with the criminal justice system, the more I question the criminal justice system. Um, there's a lot of comments here back and forth, but not questions. I just want to I think on this granted another trial, I think it is almost impossible because he's had his appeals. And so I think the thing that would need to happen would be something new needs to come to light, something substantive. There needs to be a change in somebody's story or an alteration. That's why I think on any side, if anybody has been, not forthcoming in any of this, they need to be forthcoming. I mean, it's, these are things that to me are, I don't know if people have heard the term a salvific issue. These are go to heaven or go to hell. Okay. Do something terrible and lie about it. Not good. Cause somebody to be put in prison that was innocent. Not good. These are salvific type issues. And somebody can't be telling the truth, right? Kevin Gaffin says it never happens. Ryan Applegate testified it did happen. You have these ancillary characters that seem to have Joanne Hughes, Angie Day, Brianna, David. You have these characters involved that have had input, had a tie-in with this, and you had a young kid at the time. Even when he was testifying, I think he was 14. Okay. I don't know. The judge, I was wanting to think the judge did a good job, but I didn't see something about the judges. I'm a very harsh critic, and I didn't see anything the judge did that really made me upset. It kind of made me upset about he kept telegraphing the case was going to be over at a certain time, but then I talked to somebody saying he probably wasn't just doing that out in the blue. He was probably doing it. The judge probably had been given insight from Aaron or somebody about when they thought they were going to be finished. And that's a common discussion with the judge. How much time do you think you're going to be taking? So by the way, I think Kevin got an unfair trial. I also think that if you're the victim, you're claiming to be the victim, it gets harder to prove your case as more years go by. That's what makes this one so hard. I honest to God believe somebody actually told me, I live in Claremont County, and somebody actually told me there's an attorney in Claremont County that's pretty well known named Bill Rapp. And somebody told me, had Bill Rapp been Kevin Gaffin's attorney, he would not have been convicted. And I do believe if Kevin Gaffin had proper legal counsel, he would not have been convicted. Aaron That doesn't mean Kevin Gaffin's innocent, okay? But it just Aaron just was absolutely I couldn't believe how bad of a lawyer it was. Now it's not bad, like, at first I thought, is he gonna appear hungover because he had to go to the hospital? There wasn't that. It was just like he wasn't trying hard, and he wasn't questioning people. It's like he didn't have his shit together to ask the right questions. Make Ryan address these anomalies. Make him do that. He never really did that. He just kind of blew past everything. It's bizarre. By the way, Kevin Gaffin should have known there was something up with Aaron when Aaron had him do a check to Aaron, not to Frost Brown Todd, the law firm that was supposedly representing him, Kevin Gaffin. It was just weird from the beginning. It was weird from the beginning, and I'm sure Kevin Gaffin deeply regrets not having questioned why the check would not be made payable to the law firm. All right, let me see if there's any actual questions here. So there wasn't really like an appeal per se that was granted. There was an extra hearing, so you can go watch that. I put that online. I got that video and watched it, and it's basically 3 or 4 witnesses that were not allowed, did not testify, or were not called. One of them is Tyler Cantrell. Okay. I'm just reading the comments here. I don't. There's a comment here. I don't want to. There's some stuff in here I don't want to. It's only going to put up part of it. Women's world. It's it's just kind of like I just felt like there wasn't. That's why I said I just struggled with how you would say there wasn't reasonable doubt. But I'd like to talk to a juror. I'd like to talk to a juror that was one of the jurors, and you can talk. They can talk once it's over. Um, Somebody had a comment I kind of breezed past about going hunting. That Ryan liked going hunting and hanging out with the guys going hunting, and I think that's true. Here's Brian Griffin. My brother deserves a new trial. I believe agree. I agree. Doesn't mean he's innocent. I can't. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to say for sure he's innocent or not. I don't think unless somebody changes their story. I can say that he got a bad trial. He got a trial. One of the things he claimed that was interesting is let me see if I find this. Is the detective, the cop, the chief deputy, I can't remember his name, the chief deputy that got 30 months for, as I recall, like drugging a 15-year-old and raping her or doing some sex act on her, that Kevin had actually played a role in that guy getting basically caught because Kevin went and found a photograph that would implicate that somebody had put on social media that would implicate the guy, in terms of this 15-year-old girl. I can't remember the name of the you guys in Adams County probably know your chief deputy. Isn't that kind of a kick in the ass too? You have Kevin Gaffin get three life sentences, no chance of parole, and you get your chief deputy. It's kind of like the chief deputy drugs and does a sex act or does something to a 15-year-old girl, and he gets 30 months. Are you kidding me? I mean, can you just say corrupt system? And I would say that, I'm going to have some updates on Aaron's license plate and on my records case. And I would say now at this point, all across the board, the judiciary, law enforcement, the prosecutor's office in Adams County and probably too many counties, not exemplars, not exemplars. These people should be the exemplars, the role models for the rest of us. And they're not. Aaron Haslam is not a role model for any of us, unless you want a role model of somebody who go marry somebody that's got lots of money and get in your role model as somebody who gets put into a position. And increasingly the judges there, I'm questioning those judges in terms of, they talk a game and they like to have somebody stir the pot like me, but will they actually ever be part of solving any of these issues in the justice system in Adams County? It's sad. One of the things that I didn't get is, so the jury could have convicted him of these different charges. They could have convicted him on the May event at the barn where supposedly the cousin, what's her name, Joni or something, is said Joni says she saw blood in the toilet. The second one in December, there was like nobody that saw anything. That like happened in December 2008, and nothing ever was said to anybody about it to 2015. And so why did they convict him of that one? I mean, so there wasn't anything to support that. There wasn't anybody that said they had sold it. There were the Joni Hughes had claimed that Ryan said my private parts hurt and Kevin hurt me. Okay. And that's supposedly what, if I hopefully I got that right, is what she said. I never understood in all this when Kevin Gaffin supposedly was this horrible guy calling the kid fag, queer, mama's boy, being abusive, CPS investigating him. And goes back 2008. Why the hell did Brianna marry him then? Did they get married in like 2009? Who would get married to somebody that was like this? It doesn't make a lot of sense. It just doesn't. That's what a lot of things just, it's like the smell test. And I frankly say right now, I'd really like to talk to somebody on the other side because I think there's some smell test things there that I would just like some clarification, from David Shivner, Brianna, Ryan himself, Joni Hughes, or Angie Day. They don't have to talk to me, by the way. Nobody has to talk to me, but I love to talk to them, and I'm a very open-minded guy. Other than, I think that the trial was effed up, and I think they should think the trial was not. The trial should have closed the door on the doubt about this whole thing if it was a solid trial. Okay, let's see what else we got on comments here. So I don't, if somebody says, can this be investigated higher up? No, not really. That's He's convicted. He appealed. He didn't succeed in his appeals. That's the way it works on, for right or wrong, that's the way it works. And so I think there could be some attention. I'd like to do a kind of a documentary on this if I could get some other people to talk to me, just to bring attention to it. But so far, the Gaffin side, which kind of stands to reason, the convicted guy's side will talk to me. The people on the other side won't talk to me, and I'd like for them to talk to me. And then there's people in the middle, like Tyler Cantrell, that a juror. I'd like those people to talk to me. Okay. And that's another thing in the trial is they called him the Punisher. That's why I felt like the trial was like a little bit too dramatic on just vilifying that Kevin's a bad guy. And if he's versus that's why you should convict him. That became part of the narrative. That's why he's guilty because he's the Punisher and he called the kid queer and fag and he didn't like Tim McGraw. It's that's not saying you're a pedophile, okay? And all right. Let's see if we got anything else here. There's a long list here, so I'm not near through it. So I appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. I think it's the most people I ever had on a live stream. Hopefully, I didn't let you down with boring you. There's a lot of things about Ryan tended to like spending time with Kevin doing these outdoorsy things, and I believe that that's probably true. Now, do I think that somebody could be groomed to do that or whatever? Maybe that's why I'd like if somebody out there knows somebody that's familiar with this area. But what I can't get is I just have trouble. But I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. Is if it only happened twice and it doesn't happen after those two times and it's like welled up inside this kid until 2015 and that's when it comes out. And but there's a lot of hunting and fishing in the middle of there. But it wasn't like Kevin was even alleged to have been abusing him. I did ask Ryan in text, were there other instances of abuse that you have not talked about? Because I could see that happening too, where a victim doesn't want to talk about other instances, but it just seems like I said, there's just things that are very hard to process. Like, why would he do it twice in 6 months and then never do it again? This is actually a great point. So Kevin took a lie detector test and two, he supposedly failed one by BCI and then passed one that was done by an independent person, and that she should have been given a lie detector test. That's a great point. That is a great point. Um, Seems like the crowd watching me, people think Kevin is innocent. And let's see what else I got here. There's still a lot of comments here. I don't want to keep going on and on. I'm sure that if I grew up in Mount Washington in Hamilton County, but I'm sure that my mom would have threatened me to drop me off at the children's home if the children's home had been there at some point in time if I was giving her trouble, but I didn't give her too much trouble. There's a lot of people that weren't called to testify, like David. In I don't know who all was subpoenaed. I could dig in. I'm sure I don't feel like I've dug in. I'm at a certain level of digging in. And there's a lot more digging in one could do, but I think I've probably done more digging in than maybe some people in Adams County have done digging in. But if somebody who's not even from Adams County, remember this all comes out of your prosecutor, Aaron Hasselman, Adams County, came to Claremont County and threw a trial to keep somebody from getting convicted of assault that happened in a Claremont Republican Party meeting where Tyler Cantrell was the lawyer in the courtroom and did not call the eyewitness to testify. Had he called the eyewitness, I think the person would have absolutely gotten convicted. So it shows you this kind of the way justice works, and it was very sketchy. That caused me to look into Adams County. That caused me to realize Aaron doesn't really live there. That caused me to meet Braden, not meet, but talk to Braden Gaffin, and that caused me to look into this. And I'm generally a guy that thinks I'll spend time looking into stuff, and if that has big community interest that's interesting to me, and where I think something unfair might have happened. Um, so there's a conflict in the testimony. Somebody put up here, if Joni Hughes was so concerned about the blood in the toilet, why did she wait a whole week to tell anyone? Blah blah blah. So the CPS report and her courtroom testimony are inconsistent on this. Aaron never hammers on it about when she saw the blood versus when she reported it. I believe they're inconsistent. I can make mistakes. That's why I'm saying, but I believe that they're inconsistent between the two. Um, and I don't understand, like, if the kid had, blood coming out of the rear end, wouldn't you take him to the doctor? And I don't want to seem, I'm going to leave it at that. I'm taking to the doctor, and I'm like confused at, and this will sound terrible, but at the manner, if you go listen to the trial, the manner in which these took place, where the kid was flat on the ground with his head, sideways, it would seem like a very, thank God I don't think about this stuff, but an unusual, it would seem to be difficult to make that mechanically work, what was alleged to have happened. But if it did, it would seem like it would cause damage and bleeding probably. But that's the thing. But separately, are there any other reasons why a kid can have bleeding? If that's what happened, are there any other reasons? Did they take him to the doctor? This kind of stuff. Okay, let's keep going. Well, this is a thing here. Now, the testimony in court was that Joni told Angie and her mom, who was the aunt, and that Angie didn't want Kevin to know that they were involved in reporting it because Kevin was a hothead, basically. And so that's kind of the story, and that got used kind of like another example. Everybody's afraid of Kevin, and so this is a true. This doesn't mean that anybody's lying, but it does seem odd to me that I would have gotten the hell out of that house. I would have moved someplace else. I would probably, I would have. I don't know. Maybe I don't know what ties people to certain counties and certain areas, but I think I would have moved on. And let's see what else. If I got any other questions here. And I don't like it there's somebody says any mother in the world would have moved. I feel that way, but I'm not that doesn't mean that anybody's not telling the truth, right? It just seems peculiar and you'd want to question this. You want to question if they're questioning comments on Tim McGraw on Facebook that Kevin's made, why aren't they questioning this stuff? Why wasn't Aaron Haslam questioning this? Why are you still living in that house? Yeah, you plan to move out of that house. Um, I guess this is a good point. The governor could pardon him. He could get pardoned. Hey, so that's something that that's a or his sentence commuted. That's an excellent point. I've sat here collecting this and doing this, and I'm putting my heart into it, but I'm like, how is this going to result in anything changing? When he's but maybe we've got Vivek Ramaswamy running. So I just tell people if you've got I am so overloaded is unbelievable. And then people think that I'm ignoring them or I just am so overloaded. It's unbelievable. And so if you have, or one of these people I want to talk to, if you are a juror, please contact me. I would like to talk to other people. I would like to turn this into more of a documentary. And I'm sure I'll do a terrible job and not do a thorough job as much as I should, but I will do a better job than anybody else going to do right now. And if there's somebody else, I had told Braden Gaffin, I believe at one time, or the lawyer who I think is Kevin's got a terrible lawyer right now, that I can't do much. I'm just me. But maybe if I do something, I can get somebody else to pay attention to it. Like that could do a better investigation than I can do into this. But that's a great point about could the governor pardon him? Because I think the answer is yes. I don't know. Maybe the governor doesn't have a pardon in Ohio, but here's somebody says the barn is still here. The guy said it was torn down. I swear I could see the silhouette of a dilapidated barn through the trees, but it could have been my eyes playing tricks. But Kevin seemed to indicate that he thought the barn was still there. By the way, it says it'll be torn down now. Well, that would cost some money to tear it down now, right? So that would mean you have to spend some money on tearing it down if you tear down the barn. Um, I don't know. I'm gonna do something crazy here while I got you all here. I'm gonna ask Grok if in Ohio, can a governor pardon a convicted person or commute a sentence?
Yes, in Ohio, the governor can grant pardons, commute sentences, or restore rights to convicted individuals, but only after the Ohio Parole Board reviews and recommends it. The board assesses things like rehabilitation and public safety before advising. Final call rests with the governor.
So hopefully you heard that. So I don't know if that's right. It's AI. Don't trust AI. But Grok is the best. That's as far as I can tell. And so yes, but it has to be recommended by the parole board. But I appreciate somebody making that comment. It gives me hope. There's something we could do. There is something we could do if we can get some, citizen investigators, some people come forward on the jury and talk to me. There's something we might be able to do. Actually, I'm feeling a little more upbeat that there's something that can be done that might draw some attention. Let's see. I don't know if I'm keeping up with these comments. Um, I don't. Could you look at this thing happened in 2015 when the kid went to the office or the teacher, and then the trial was in 2016. So I don't know the gap between the that event and there actually being charges. So it was not like the thing was that the two events in question happened in 2008. That's another thing I probably would have highlighted. Does Kevin Gaffin have any other pattern of anything like this, of being accused of sexually assaulting a woman or anybody? Does that happen? Okay, let's see. I'm going to try to wrap up here just to see if I see any questions that or that stand out here. Okay, I think I'm kind of coming to a close here. I'm not tired. This is my normal look. My normal look is tired and disheveled. Uh, so let's see if anything. Man, I keep going down this list, and there keeps being more comments. It's like I keep scrolling down, and like, when are they over? Um, let's see if I don't mean to cut any of anybody's comments. I wish the other side would talk. I guarantee you I'll give him a fair shake. I'll give him a fair shake. Remember, I could come to the conclusion that he got a bad trial, but that he's probably guilty, right? I could come to that conclusion. But right now, I don't have anybody from the other side that will really talk to me, or these people in the middle. The jury. By the way, there's in the files I have, there was a Supreme Court disciplinary complaint that looked like Aaron did not cooperate, and I don't know what all happened with that. I need to get into that. There's just so much stuff here, and it's hard for me to keep up on it. And it's hard for me. I want to net it in because there's so many ways you could go. You could go so many different directions, and I want to keep focus in and um, net it to the things that really matter because there's a lot of stuff that doesn't matter that I could get stuck on. I don't know how Aaron sleeps at night. I mean, he's not gonna get this. We should get disbarred, but it's how do you be such a fraud? And I think Aaron Haslam is a fraud. I know he was like a good basketball player and or something like that in Adams County, and that's how people knew him. But it's just sad. Um, Jeff McCarty. Hold on, I don't want to say somebody's name. Was Jeff McCarty the name of the chief deputy? I don't want to say somebody's name. Oh, I said somebody's name like they were this person. Let's go. Let's go here. I'm gonna have to. They just keep going on and on. I keep scrolling down, and the thing just keeps showing me more comments. I don't. I'm gonna tell a real quick story here, and I'm gonna wrap up. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna about if you knew him like we do, we know he's a really good person. Um, so this is by the way, I'm going to come back to this. This is the thing here is I think that the guy that was the counselor who supposedly had all these sessions should have been questioned more thoroughly. John Ruffalo, he was a young counselor at the time. And I do think there was one of the people, the person from the Mayerson Clinic, what was her name? She talked, what is her name? I got it here somewhere. She talked and she said she didn't ask leading questions in the trial, but then Cindy Freehofer might be the right name, but then she has tons of leading questions in the interview. It's like, do you not know what a leading question is? And I want to remember that one comment that about the, so this full video is on my page right now. So it's going there right now, but I want to, remember that comment about, Kevin's a good guy and all this stuff. And I'm just kind of looking to see if I got to wrap it up here. And I'm just scrolling down here to see if anything pops of a comment here that I want to hit on. I don't want to be short with anybody. So here's the deal. I'm going to wrap it up here. So I worked at Guardian Angels Church, which is in Mount Washington and Hamilton County when I was in high school. And I was there 2 nights a week, working 3 hours, opening and closing doors. It was a very big parish. There were at the time 4 priests or 5 priests that varied that lived at the rectory. There were always meetings going on. And the worst pedophile priest, Father George Cooley, was there when I worked there. Okay. And I never would have suspected a thing. I never would have suspected that Father Cooley was a pedophile. And I was there all the time. I was also the wedding setup takedown guy or wedding coordinator. So in the wedding months, I was there on Friday and Saturday nights almost every night to like 7, 8 o'clock, and I'd spend a lot of time in the rectory because, like, when the weddings were going on, I would be there. When I was working, I was in the rectory. During weddings, I would watch TV and stuff in the living room, and I never would have suspected Father Cooley. Okay, and then it turned out he was the worst pedophile priest in Greater Cincinnati. And so I'm not saying that, I don't say that you just can't go based on that, a person was a good person, and and I don't want anybody to get mad at me like I'm saying Kevin Gaffin did it. I'm just saying, character means something, but it means it, but there can be things that catch you a blindside. And that's why I think it's so important that Brianna, David, Joni, Angie, Tyler, talk to me. Somebody talk to me. Or a juror, talk to me. Talk to me. Especially somebody from the other side. I'm not going to do you dirty. I'm not setting you up. I'm not going to dismiss what you tell me because I already have a preordained conclusion. That's what Ryan kept claiming. You already have a conclusion. I don't have a conclusion. I'm one of the most open-minded people you can find. And I think that's the way we all should be. And it's the way I think the press should be, is I want to get to the bottom of it. And so with that, I know this might not have been fulfilling. Hopefully people got something out of it. I'm going to keep working this. It's not going to be like an instant gratification thing. The most important thing right now is that some other people come to me and talk to me. My email address is online. They can message me. If it's not that hard to figure out my mobile number. It's on a lot of things I put out. And if you are somebody, don't let me ignore you. If you are somebody, and I'm not saying anybody, like a friend of Kevin, I get it, okay? But if you are one of these people, Brianna, David, Joni, Angie, Tyler, any of these people, and I'll try to get some of them. There's some people that Kevin gave me to talk to that were directly connected. Our juror, please don't give up. I get overloaded. I want to talk to you. And if you try to talk to me and you think I dismissed you or I'm not following up, that's just because I'm dysfunctional. I want to talk to you. I want to talk to people, especially those that have a different perception. Then I think what the lion's share of people that were on here tonight is that Kevin was innocent of this. And I'll stick by what I said. I don't think he got a good trial. I think Aaron Haslam is a joke. And so by the way, Kenny Dick was part of the trial also. And I'll leave it with this. Kenny Dick said, they asked, like, did you interview Ryan yourself? No, I didn't interview him because I didn't want him to have to relive it. Well, that's law enforcement 101. You ask people to tell a story more than one time to see if the story changes. So that was like dumb. Well, I thought that was really dumb that Kenny Dick said he never interviewed him. But with that, thank you guys for showing up tonight. I did want to bring some closure from the interview in prison, that what took place. I wish I had audio and video from it, but they won't let me do that. And I'm not going to let it go. I'm going to keep following up. I'm going to keep focused on it. And if there are other cases like this that are of wide public importance, I can't focus on, I'm so overloaded right now, but if I find something like this, like something that has broad interest, is clear that there's some kind of issues or open-ended thing, try to get me to cover it. But I'm just so overloaded right now. And I wish I could clone myself so that some more people, if you have the skills that could really help. Not that I don't want to be rude to anybody, but if you want to help but you don't have skills, you're not going to help really. But if you have skills and you want to help, I'm glad to take help from people that want to help me dig into this. Thank you guys for tuning in tonight. Have a great rest of the evening, and let's stick with this and see if we can turn this into something where we